I think a way that I've gotten better at describing that, I tend to sometimes fall into hard skills versus soft skills, but tends to diminish the value of those quote unquote soft skills of connecting with people, building value, communicating, reading the room. EQ, like the emotional intelligence quotient, is ironically, it starts off with just getting yourself out of your own head. It means instead of thinking about only what I care about, what I'm stressed out by, what I'm motivated by, can I zoom out and actually put myself in the shoes of the person that I'm talking to?
It helps you get them to say yes, and then it also helps you to, again, like you said, set expectations. I'm thinking about that woman. You had to put yourself in her shoes and say, what's going on in your life that you need to get this done? Welcome back to another episode of the Full Arch Advantage podcast. I'm your host, Gary Bird. I'm the owner of SMC National, where we help offices just like yours level the playing field so you can grow the way that you want. And today I have Dr. Alex Sharp, who's going to be breaking down how to properly communicate. One of the biggest obstacles that we see in Full Arch is that doctors don't understand how to communicate to their patients and to their team. And Dr. Alex is going to do a masterclass on how to actually do that. If you didn't catch the last episode, go check it out. He broke down of how he scaled 37 practices all in Full Arch, and it was a really good episode. So this one is a little more niche, but if you are doing anything in Full Arch, this is going to be something that's going to help you, your patients, and your team. Stay tuned. All right, we are live for another episode, and this is going to be a good one. Recently, I talked to Dr. Alex Sharp on an episode we just aired. It's on YouTube right now, and he broke down how he scaled 37 practices to help them build their Full Arch dream practices. And he broke down the whole recipe and all those kind of things. And I asked him on that show, what was the number one thing that's holding people back from being successful with Full Arch? And he said, hands down, it's communication. It's communication internally with the team and externally. And so he's doing a presentation in a couple months, and it's all sold out already. So I promise you're going to be mind blown by this content. It's really, really good. He spent a lot of time thinking about this. And so that one's already sold out, but he's going to be doing another one very, very soon, beginning around springtime. So if you want to attend that, I'm going to drop this. I don't normally do this at the beginning of the shows. Go to their site, thefullarchpodcast.com, and they'll have all the details. And so let's just jump right into this, Dr. Alex. What is the number one thing that's holding people back from growing when it comes to Full Arch?
Well, it's definitely the ability to articulate the value proposition, I would say. And that sounds broad as an answer because it is broad, but really it's understanding the best way to position the transformative nature of the procedure that you're able to offer. Because it's not just a procedure, it's a massive life shift that you're able to unlock for these patients. I was actually doing an interview with a prospective doctor that wants to join our group earlier today. And one of my favorite interview questions is, please describe for me I think the way that I phrased it was the most transformative impact that you've had on a patient's life. Like, what is the most meaningful experience that you've helped to unlock for a patient through your dentistry? And the reason why I like asking that question is because, number one, I like hearing the stories because what we do never gets old. And then number two, I like to be able to understand how well can that dentist connect the dots between the place that a patient started, what they were like in the middle of treatment, and then how their life was transformed by virtue of the treatment that they received. Because if a dentist can understand all of those steps and see from seed to stem how that goes about, then chances are they understand the utility of connecting with patients on the front end to be able to reverse engineer those outcomes. So for me, it's step one is connecting. Like the communication piece, like you have to communicate, obviously, you have to express yourself clearly. But in order to do that, you first have to stop and listen. So when I'm helping people be more effective at communicating, it's very counterintuitive. First, you have to listen. First, you have to understand, what are the motivators? What are people trying to achieve? What do they care about? And then also, equally as important, what are their stumbling blocks? What are their objections? So you have to, by the same token, understand goals and objections, listen, not listening to respond, but listening to understand, And then you put yourself in a position to be able to weave your narrative of what you know they can get out of the procedure that you offer, weave that into what they're telling you using their own language. And then you're put in a position to actually be able to execute on the treatment that you want to have that patient undergo. Because we all dentists love the actual dentistry part. We love being a human drill press. We love being able to do all of those things. But you can't do that unless the patient understands, the patient believes, the patient trusts, and most importantly, the patient can envision what's on the other end of the rainbow once they start treatment with you.
I love the breakdown of that. And I love that term, a human drill press. I haven't heard that one before. So yeah, this is one of the biggest issues in dental, all dental, not just full arch. It just gets harder in full arch. Actually, a lot of people online, if you go on social media and stuff, think that dentistry is a scam. Like dentists are scamming the patients. And it's because I actually posted about this in Facebook recently. I asked a question, how do you get trust from your patients? Or why do patients trust us as much as, why do some patients trust us more than others? That was the question. And I got a lot of comments on it. And very few people actually hit on what the root problem is. And it really boils down to how you communicate about the problem. When somebody falls and chips their tooth, you don't really need a lot of communication about that because they see it so clearly. My teeth are really jacked up. And so they come in and they kind of get the treatment done and it's fairly easy. But when you're explaining things that are happening below the surface and that are going to impact them over years, you really have to be able to communicate that. And not a lot of dentists are just horrible at it, to be honest with you. And so I love that you're bringing this subject up. Now, one of the things that you brought up is the difference between, before we hit record, you said dentists love the hard skills, but it's really the soft skills. And what did you mean by that?
I think a way that I've gotten better at describing that, because I tend to sometimes fall into hard skills versus soft skills, but that tends to diminish the value of those quote unquote soft skills of connecting with people, building value, communicating, reading the room. More often, I'm trying to refer to it as EQs, but I sometimes slip into the soft skills designation. But EQ, like the emotional intelligence quotient, is ironically, it starts off with just getting yourself out of your own head. It means instead of thinking about only what I care about, what I'm stressed out by, what I'm motivated by, can I zoom out and actually put myself in the shoes of the person that I'm talking to, which is a prerequisite to connecting with them. So EQ, you can fall on the old adage of, oh, I'm just not that good at communicating, I'm not that good at reading people, or I don't have that ability to really read the room. But I think it's a learned skill. I really do. I think if you put effort into it and you actually try to sympathize, grow your ability to pick up on empathy, then you're going to be better at really communicating in a way that resonates with your audience. But it starts with authentically wanting to connect. And so, yeah, I think the hard skills, dentists are great at those. Dentists go to CE for those. Dentists pay through the nose for courses to hone that skill set. But then that skill set hangs out in the closet in a box, like gathering dust, if you can't equip yourself with the skills that allow you to bring that to the forefront, which is getting people over their barriers to receiving treatment, which is why I think communication is an evergreen concept. And one of the things that I'm going to be talking about in that course that you mentioned is some of the dichotomies that you have to reconcile in dentistry. And one of those dichotomies is that you have to be confident, but also humble, because you can't veer too much into the confident realm or you're off-putting to people. You can't veer too much into the humble realm, or else you don't know what you're talking about and you're not looked upon as the font of all knowledge, like an expert. You need to be in the middle. And I think it's the same with the hard skills and the soft skills. You can't be completely a bookish encyclopedia of biology and physiology, but at the same time, you can't just be super duper airy fairy, warm and fuzzy. You have to be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you also said something at the beginning. You said you have to learn how to weave your story or your treatment into their story, weave their story in. So you have to listen. Could you give me, and I think I understand what you're saying, but could you give me some like actual examples of how you used that before? Like how did a patient come in, tell you their story? Because really doing full arch at the end of the day for the dentist is pretty much the same thing. I know each patient is different, but you have a skill and you're doing that skill, and then the circumstances are a little bit different, but it impacts patients differently in massive ways. So could you explain that a little more, like in an illustration, or how you've seen it play out before?
Yeah, a really good example is when I did full arch treatment on a lady who's a professional singer. So imagine pressure, right? Like the lady performs for a living, literally under the spotlight, has to keep her phonetics and her ability to project the same. And to make it even more sketchy, her budget at the time was such that she couldn't swing implants. It was either full denture or nothing. Well, it was basically the situation with the brass tacks of her finances. So she had all this infection going on, no posterior teeth. It was all anterior teeth, but they were all root canaled, crowned, abscessed, and it was like put up or shut up time. And so we made her the best darn immediate denture that we could. And her objection, her fear, was not being able to do her job, not being able to continue to pursue her passion of singing and entertaining people. But her goal was to get something that was lifelike, reminiscent of what she's used to having in her mouth. So I was on this like mission basically to mimic what she's used to within the rules of engagement of a denture. So that was what she was coming in with. And she was obviously fearful of her day-to-day life being diminished. So that was what I had to do, is weave that tapestry of her preferences and her needs and her objections into what I was able to offer, while at the same time setting expectations appropriately and discussing the potential red tape, the potential dropped balls, the potential for her body to respond XYZ ways. And luckily, it went really well. Luckily, she was happy. Luckily, she was a raving fan. But you get complicated situations like that all the time. And I would argue that that's more the rule than the exception. As dentists, we can view ourselves, again, on an assembly line. People come in, they need this, we do it, they leave. And I would argue that each situation deserves its just due as being unique. No two are the same. You might see different avatars of situations where you're doing all on four. Maybe you're doing upper denture, lower snap-on denture. There's different avatars and different themes, but each person attached to those teeth is different. And if you approach it with that level of pomp and circumstance, then you're more likely to spend the time to connect with that person, which helps you to get them over the hump.
Yeah, it helps you get them to say yes. And then it also helps you to, again, like you said, set expectations. I'm thinking about that woman. You had to put yourself in her shoes and say, what's going on in your life that you need to get this done? And I can see clinically why you need to get it done. But there were so many other components of singing and breathing and all these different things that really impacted the way that you were going to do treatment. And then if you were able to articulate to her, hey, I got you, I know how to figure this out. However, you're making it a little bit more complicated because of the level of your finances. We're only going to be able to do it this way. Here's the risk. Here's the reward. Now you're setting expectations, but you got to get to the bottom of that. And now trust, and people get scared of this. It's funny how this works, right? It's like we don't, in sales a lot of times, and I know no one likes the word sales out there, but it's true. You got to sell. In sales, they teach you want to actually be transparent of what you're strong at and what you're worried about, because it builds trust. But in the moment, so often we want to just pretend like we can do everything. And that actually sets you up for failure in the long term, right? So you want to actually tell them, no, we can't do this. We can do this. Here's what I'm worried about. That actually builds trust and puts you in the expert position more so than you would normally think. Do you agree with that?
I completely agree. And I think that there's a lot of nuance with that approach. And I think if handled well, you nailed it. What happens a lot of times, though, is that people try to embody that. They try to embody that vulnerability and to be upfront with people, but it actually hurts people sometimes when they lean too much into it, and they go through the whole laundry list of potential pitfalls or complications, and they scare the patient away by trying to be transparent. And one thing, and this could be helpful or this could be oversimplified, but what I've found to be the most effective is to talk in terms of most of the time, traditionally, most of our patients, the lion's share of patients experience this. Then we enroll the patient, we get the deposit, we get rolling, and then we go through the microscopic likelihood of like problems that come after that, so that there's a segmentation of, we talk about most of the time, here's what people can expect. We can talk about the high level risks and stuff. Patient gets enrolled, and then before we embark upon treatment, we do all of the red tape and talk about every last thing under the sun that could possibly happen, so that the patient goes in eyes wide open. But it can be very complicated when we're on the front end, front loading all of the good stuff, all of the bad stuff. It's hard to know which way is up. People find their own way to have those types of discussions. But I do think you're right. I think it's good to err on the side of vulnerability. Here's my limits based upon the procedure that you're opting to go with. Here's what you need to be completely aware of going into this. And it does position you, it humanizes you. And one quick little thing that I've taught a lot of dentists is, and this sounds so basic and people probably already do this, but it's powerful, is you sit down with the person knee to knee on their level, and you just say, look, if you were my mom, in all transparency, I would recommend that you do this. And usually that's good to throw in at the end of the education, at the end of discussing all the options. And it's dramatic, it's true. And if you're operating from a place of authenticity, it really resonates with people.
Yeah, I love that. I actually use that. So anytime I'm in a big buying decision and I'm not an expert in that area, which is often, I actually use that. Like, hey, what would you recommend to your mom in this situation, or your brother, or whoever the ideal avatar that they're trying to sell to is? And I love that framework that you gave there. I want the audience to catch that. You present that up front is the usually. Here's usually what's going to happen. You're going to be super happy with your outcome. There's going to be these, some pain. There's going to be some swelling or whatever. And then you finish with the rarely. So it's the usually and the rarely. And you know what it made me think of is all those medication ads that you see on TV. That's what they do. They go, hey, if you take this, it's going to help your hair grow back, and it's going to help you live a better life and a more fulfilled life. And it's going to do this and this and this. And I know this is like an extreme example, but then at the end, it's like, may cause you to vomit blood and may kill you. All the disclaimers at the end that probably won't happen, but they kind of have to work them in legally. I really love that framework a lot. So I want to now transition a little bit over to, it's still communication, but over to the team, because you said initially, it's like, okay, great, you learn how to communicate with the patients, but there's still this team aspect that has to be communicated, especially early on as you're starting to implement full arch. And I imagine even after, with the partners that you choose and as you continue to level up, how do you framework that, and how do you talk through that?
The workflow that we adopt in almost everything that we do, whether it comes down to our company core values or the way that we train, is we do our darndest to start from the inside out. And that can mean really minding what you say, what you think, coming to work with a grateful heart, wanting to improve every day, owning what you can control, and then taking care to put your team first so that you can render great patient care. It's kind of like a bullseye, right? Like you take care of number one and you optimize what you can control within yourself. Then you focus on team collaboration, teamwork, which leads to patient success. If you try to rewire that equation and only prioritize the patient care without prioritizing the team dynamics, things fall apart. So I think of that as controlling your inputs to get the outputs that you want. So like one of the inputs is being grateful, reading stuff that uplifts you, not that tears you down and makes you all dour and miserable.
Like the news.
Like the news. Who watches the news anymore? And then you double down on workshopping your flow, your communication, your interplay between your team members, so that they know what you're going to say before you even walk in the room. That comes from hours and hours of repetition and iteration and improvement. And so, one of the things that we're going to be doing internally in our company is when we have our big company-wide retreat next May, we're going to set it up to where the doctors and then the practice leaders are at the same table, at the same desk, hearing the same message, so that there's that consistency, that camaraderie, the simultaneous light bulbs going off, because you have to have that same pageness with the key person that's helping you to close these cases. And if you don't have trust if they don't have trust that you have their back and vice versa, then the patient's going to pick up on that. They might not be able to say, man, the relationship between those two is really weird. They may not be able to put their finger on it, but something just feels off. And it's the opposite of a buying signal when that happens.
Bad vibes is what the kids call it.
Bad.
Yeah.
The vibes are bad. So I actually just had an off-site visit with one of our teams last week where I flew to the location. Instead of doing a traditional, like I bring my clipboard and I'm seeing how things are going at the practice, we actually scheduled time for an offsite and a conference room where we got clear on what are we about as a company, how do we define success, what do we care about, where are the disconnects between what each of us is coming in expecting to achieve. And we came away with just a lot less friction between the team members because we took the time to level set, get on the same page, and then recalibrate our angle of approach. And then, we're poised to kill it because we took the time to connect as people, as teammates, so that then we can perform well in the practice. If you don't take time to work, see, that's my definition of working on the business. You hear that trite expression, like you got to work on the business, not just in the business. But when you actually put that to use, it can be powerful.
Yeah. And so dental offices are kind of known for having toxic environments because I think it's because of the nature of the work, right? The doctor is like
stressful.
It's stressful. It's high stress. And it's also, there's no room for error really. Right. And usually dentists are perfectionists, and rightfully so. Like they're working on people's bodies and things like that. And so it's like high stress, perfectionist driven, D personalities. And so it creates this like high pressure and just like doesn't always have the best vibes, like you said, between the team members